Welcome back, everyone. I'm still trying to get things sorted out here. Bear with me. I gotta do this right. Okay. So, all right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Usual welcome. Happy May. That sort of stuff. All right. So I can never predict how long these things are going to be, but the content I have today is going to be a little shorter. There's a longer video. It's close to between 6 and 7 minutes. So I just want to give you a fair warning about that. If you notice what the theme of this show is, I have a friend who passed many years ago, but I always honor him on Memorial Day. So I'm going to put a video up that's not my own, but I had to obviously change the music so YouTube wouldn't put a strike against me or whatever. But I will play that as, at some point during this video. Also, we're going to do the standard upcoming episodes. I have about 5 episodes in the chamber. They're not complete, I'm not finished editing, but I have the raw footage, so I don't have to worry about. The only person I can blame at this point is me. I can't blame schedules and calendars and things like that. But I got some good ones coming up, and we'll talk about that. Then I'll talk my current projects, but that'll be like less than 30 seconds. It'll be very fast. We're gonna do that video that I talked about earlier, and then I'm just gonna talk about some weird. I had that coincidence video with Dr. Beitman that, and then there's a few other videos that I recorded after that, or before that and after that. So obviously my brain is attuned to weird stuff like that. So I'm starting to see weird stuff like that everywhere I look. Now, again, it could just be that I'm attuned to it. So it could be completely harmless, whatever it is, but there's some weird stuff that's kind of been happening, but nothing like, nothing that I would, write a book about or anything. And then we'll do kind of questions at the end. All right. So let me just check the chat real quick to make sure. Let's see. It's a social media honeypot. I don't know. Is it really? We'll see. We will see. Okay. All right. So let me get to the first piece that you guys always like. So let's get started on that. Okay, and then I'm just going to clean some, as usual. I just got to be nice and tidy. Okay. All right, so obviously I'm just going to voice over this, but the first person I've actually been trying to get Mike Clone on my show for a while, and I recorded this way back in the beginning of May about owls and UFOs and all that stuff, which if you read my community tab, almost immediately I have an owl dream and all that stuff. So you can talk about that coincidence after I talk to Mike Clellan. But there's this really weird tie or correlation. Very strong correlation between seeing owls and also having UFO experiences, particularly 4-foot owls, which don't exist in nature. So anyway, it's a really good episode. We get kind of hyped up, started on that. And then following that, we get into kind of, well, what does all this mean? And it gets pretty bizarre. Like we get into some like crazy stuff. And Mike Clone would be the first to admit he doesn't know if this was kind of out of body. He doesn't know if it was real. He doesn't know if it was a vision or like a really crazy dream. I don't think he thinks it's a really crazy dream, but there's some crazy stuff going on there about the nature of reality and how everything works. And it basically resonates with everything I've interviewed everybody else on this channel about. It is a crazy episode. All right. And then based on demand, folks wanted Edward Reardon on, and Edward Reardon, I reached out to him and he agreed to be on. So we're doing 2 videos with him. The first one is he has a theory about the biological mechanisms of remote viewing. So not the sort of stuff that David Morehouse has spoken about, which is kind of more holistic and outside of the brain. This is kind of once the signal gets into the brain, what his belief about how, or, based on his own remote viewing of himself, he believes are the areas of the brain that help stimulate remote viewing. So we're talking about the CA3 region. We're talking about the, I'll probably get this stuff wrong, but the, there's like the dentite gyrus or something. I don't know. There's some weird stuff, but we'll get into that in that video. The next one is, and I think we talked about this on the last live stream, where Edward Reardon was the first person to come up with, just out of the blue in one of his remote viewing, he had to do a remote viewing project on what would be the catalyst for a digitized fiat currency. And he started seeing visions of the pandemic. So, kind of what the virus looked like. He saw the outbreak. He saw, wait for it. He saw a lab. But this was in 2017, November of 2017. And there's other crazy stuff that's on there. But, you could talk about interviewing people and them making claims. He has a website or a YouTube channel. You go to his YouTube channel. I think it's just Edward Reardon. And there is a video that was posted in November 2017 that literally goes through all this. So he's not making it up. He also kept seeing the words game of function, not gain, but game, Game, which, it could just be, but it was a term he started seeing in the beginning of 2021, long before I think they were talking about gain of function and things like that. So that's going to be a pretty good one. And then this one, I was very fortunate that this individual agreed to meet with me. It was actually relatively quick because I held off reaching out to this person because I didn't have his book yet, and I wanted to read his book. Something told me that I needed to read his book first before I interviewed him. So once I had his book and I started reading it, I reached out, and one of his colleagues immediately within 5 minutes reached back out to me and said, yes, absolutely. By the way, love your channel. And which I'm like, really? Like I got like 1,600 subscribers. How do you even know my channel exists? So anyway, I'm not going to do a drum roll or anything, but Chris Bledsoe. And this one is an interesting one because there have been a number of things that if you haven't checked out the book, it's called UFO of God. And he's had this interaction with non-human entities that he considers to be what were angels in the Bible and things like that. But if you ask him, he doesn't really know where they come from, if they're interdimensional, if they're, at least he hasn't said. The government might have a pretty good idea, and maybe he might be a little reticent to talk about some of this stuff because it might still be classified. But he started having these experiences kind of back in I think in 2007 or 2008, kind of January timeframe. And once the government, he started getting, for lack of a better word, I'll use the word prediction, but this entity called the Lady met with them, and it's the same, or it may be the same entity that appeared at Fatima and Our Lady of Guadalupe, which the Catholic Church has kind of claims is the Virgin Mary, and it's not his claim, but he believes there might be something that's similar to it. So I asked questions about that. I also asked questions about why there were particular interventions. And he was also, when these things started happening, the government got involved because of I think he made 2 claims and they came true. And they were very specific. Like there would be an a 6.8 Richter scale earthquake or magnitude earthquake in Baja, California in September of 2012. And then there was. And then there's also, you talked about election disruptions in New York during the year that he issued the prediction. And they came true. So he subsequently began working with the government. They kind of came in, locked him down, and didn't let him, or he agreed to, I don't know if it was didn't let, or he agreed to not to speak, not to go to UFO conferences, not to do anything for, close to, I think it's between 7 years to a decade, something like that. And actually, it's probably the better part of a decade. And now he's finally coming out and talking about some of these things. And one of the interesting things is he talks about, you'll hear John Ramirez, who's former CIA, not operative, but analyst, who said that there was going to be disclosure this year. And then there was going to be some sort of event in 2026 toward the end or beginning of 2027. There was, I haven't interviewed any other than Angela Ford, who was a government DoD remote viewer, I haven't interviewed any channelers. But there's and I haven't had any experiences with it. I don't know what to make of it. To me, it seems a little bit on the extreme woo side. That's not to mean that it doesn't work or doesn't exist. It's just it's hard for me to decipher between who the fraudsters are and who the uh, people legit, if there are any. But one of those individuals, someone named I think it's David Anka, he channels an entity called Bashir. Well, according to him, Bashir said that there would be open contact by 2026 with ETs. That's been the most explicit. So what Chris Bledsoe told me, and it's in his book. I'm not saying anything that hasn't come out in the interview or anything like that. But he had a vision, or the lady told him that there would be something that happened in 2026, or something would happen when Regulus would rise and be aligned with the Sphinx at sunrise, right? So Regulus is actually one of the stars in the constellation of Leo. Leo, the Sphinx is a representation of that constellation. And what he did is he asked some astronomers, maybe some astrologers, at what point would the stars align to that point, to that, get to that alignment. And the answer was September 23rd, 2026. So again, there's that 2026 year. And then, of course, I had an interview with Steve Bassett. He thinks disclosure is coming. There's a recent statement that Stephen Greer, and again, coming this year, there's a statement that Stephen Greer made that he thinks that disclosure is coming this year. Chris Bledsoe, in this interview on camera, told me he's positive it's happening. So again, he's involved with the intelligence community and things like that. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I would take it with a grain of salt. You just have to be careful with not. I think absolutely Chris is telling the truth. I don't think that man is one of the purest of heart people I've ever met. He's a good, solid, genuine person. But the people who surround him, I don't know, right? There's some great people in the intelligence community. David Morehouse is one of them. And there's some shady people, right? And, if you look at the Durham report that was released recently, you can see exactly what I mean. So anyway, I'm not going to get too much more into that. So, all right. So with that, let's get back let's go to the next section, which is state of the channel. Before I do that, I'm just going to do a quick check, see what folks, I have like 8 comments here. So yeah, Moon Man, it's not, Tyler D has a name. It's Tim Taylor. That's the guy's name. It is rather odd. Tim Taylor is also one of those enigmatic personalities that you can't find a picture of him anywhere on the internet, at least not that I've been able to. Again, his name, though, is so generic, it's hard not to. However, there is a picture of him in Chris Bledsoe's book. So just one, but just you can check that one out. Let's see. That's right, Daryl. I got his name wrong. I said David Anka. Yeah, it's Daryl Anka. And that was on the YouTube channel Next Level Soul. So if you go and look at the latest Daryl Anka interview, he kind of just says it, and Alex Ferrari kind of doesn't really react. But I just noticed, all this stuff's correlated. So yeah, Moon Man, say more. He's like pure of heart. That's my best. Interesting. Scrapes. I'm assuming when you say scrape something, and you're talking Tim Taylor. Anyway, all right. Let me get back to the. I'm gonna go through this really shortly because I don't know if people are interested in this or not. But just give me a second. Okay. Yeah, I just want to add this really quick. Yeah, it does seem like a foregone conclusion. My sense is that this is not like this is they're been being dragged in. They're being brought in. At least the U.S. government is being brought in screaming, like they're being dragged into this. I don't think they have a choice. I think if they don't do something soon, their credibility is already like it's really hurting, right? You have like FBI not checking up on assertions about a presidential candidate. Look, I'm not going to get into one side or the other. If this happened to Hillary Clinton too, it would horrify me. All right, and I mean, just because it happened to Trump, the other person, the intelligence community should not be involved in elections in any way, shape, or form. But when you see things like not investigating a hoax, using it to undermine a presidential administration, then canceling free speech on Twitter, or pressuring Twitter to ban people's accounts just because they say something that's, even if by proxy, even if at a distance. Right now, the government is losing a lot of credibility, and if they don't move fast, this could be the last. Well, I shouldn't say this could be the end, but it's they need to do something to restore credibility. If you look at recruiting, people who are patriotic and serve, they're not serving anymore. They're not sending their kids to serve anymore after kind of the Afghanistan debacle and things like that. Not because the whole thing was a debacle, but because the withdrawal at the very end was handled with such staggering incompetence that it was a stimulus, in my opinion, which is just an opinion, that Putin thought we were weak and decided to take a crack at Ukraine. I think that all stems from that moment. There are other factors too, like NATO pushing toward the border with both administrations. And there's other shady stuff, like what happened with the Nord Stream pipeline, right? If the Russians did it, why are they rebuilding it? Things, just simple questions like that. And there's just the news media has already been captured by the official narrative of whoever's in charge, and I frankly don't even know who's in charge at this point. You have a doddering old man, and by the way, I have Biden was my state senator. I have nothing against Biden. I actually like the guy on a one-on-one level, but he's old. It doesn't strike me as being the guy in charge right now. So the question is who is? Anyway, there's a lot of stuff that they need to be decisive. They need to move, and they need to admit why things were hidden. And I'm sure there are good reasons, and I'm sure there are other bad reasons. But let's just get this out there, and let's focus up there or around us, whether it's transdimensional, whether it's ETs, all the above, whether it's just a truth about the nature of reality that we don't understand. Let's just get it out there, right? Because if people were being taken out of their homes and things like that, and the government said nothing, warned nobody, that's messed up. So anyway, let's see. Yeah, it does obscure plenty. Yeah, that's also true. The baby boomer generation is doesn't want to let go. All right. So just going through this really quick. I'm going to be quick with this because I'm not sure if people like this stuff or not, but it's just I want people to see the journey that I'm going on. But if you look at these stats, like in April, it wasn't a good month. Like I'm doing okay on views, but the subscriber rate is not like I'm working my nuts off, and it's not showing, and I don't know why, right? But there are folks who are helping me out, at least who follow this channel, who are like feeding me ideas, and they've been awesome. Like stuff I wouldn't even consider. Like you'll notice I'll have a blue check mark in the next few days, as whenever Twitter verifies me. But the only reason I did that is Brian Baird sent me like a coffee, right? Whatever it is, buy me a coffee, like 3 of them or 6 of them. Sorry. He's like, look, if you try it out for 3 months to see if it'll grow your channel, and I'll buy you 6 coffees to fund it, And look, it's not like I'm hurting for money, folks. So I'm not asking for people to do that. I just want to. I'm saying this because I want to recognize Brian for what he did, because I didn't ask for it, but it was a great idea, and I wouldn't have done it myself because I'm very focused on return on investment. But by kind of reducing the friction, I'm like, yeah, I mean, if that's what you want me to do and you want to do that for me, I'm not. I think it's, I'll roll the dice and see what happens. So hopefully we can get through this. But my goal is to get to 10,000 by the end of the year, and right now the math ain't looking good. It's looking a little bit better in May, but we'll see. And there's a ton of other stuff that I do to actually earn a living. So I left, and I can always go back. I can always go back and be a CFO at some company. But after 2020, the political climate in corporations and things like that has gotten to the point where it is very difficult for someone who is a truth teller to operate. So what I've been doing to, to provide for myself and my family is I do build financial models for startups, which is good. And then I also work as a contractor for a well-known business school that you can figure out. But what I do is I am a course facilitator at some of their executive ed programs, which I also enjoy doing. And those two things are kind of getting me through everything, but are not like are not paying like a corporate job. The goal is I'm giving this channel about 5 years, and if I can make this into a juggernaut of kind of entertainment industry business, which I think again, this channel, the way it stands right now, is focused on a very specific topic. But what I see in the long run is, as the cost to produce content continuously declines, as AI tools get better and better, I think Hollywood is in trouble. And I think Hollywood is in trouble because they're not making movies that a good portion of the country wants to see. Part of that reason is, for the big budget films, it has to do well in China in order to justify the cost. So what you're seeing is a lot of these retreads with ideas that have been validated. So that's why you're seeing 1 billion Marvel movies, and which are great, things like that. But in the long run, I see this channel. If you know what my background is, I can run a business at scale. I'm very good at that. I ran the finance department. I wasn't the CFO, but I ran the finance department for a company that was the fastest to reach decacorn status in history. I'm not going to say what the name of that company was, and there was drama, man. But if you look it up, it reached $10 billion valuation faster than Facebook did. This is way back when. But I could do hypergrowth. I could do all that stuff. The hardest part about running a business is bringing in revenue, at least for me. Again, this is not an appeal. It's just, I have a plan. Many of you have seen the plan from the very beginning, and I'm constantly adjusting. And folks have actually been really helping me do things I didn't even consider, because they're good ideas. And you don't have to have a fancy MBA to execute or to come up with a good idea. Now, executing and all that stuff. Anyway, the bottom line is that's my goal. So how can you guys help? Spread the channel far and wide, share it, like it, get your friends to subscribe, and hopefully that'll dovetail and move on. The other factor, so that's kind of the long-term vision, things like that. Like, I can see people on YouTube. It's already happened. There was a movie called The Chosen that was entirely crowdfunded and things like that, from Daryl Eves, that did well. So there is a precedent. But what I think you're going to see is a serious competitor to Hollywood from independent producers. And in 5 to 10 years, I think I can get there. But I just have to make sure that I don't run out of money before I get there. Doing fine, everybody. But and by the way, you don't want to get there too fast because you want to know what you're doing, right? You want to have everything kind of together. So anyway, that's a long. The other thing that I think is going to happen over the next, starting on June 6th, you've seen this Beyond Skinwalker. Okay, now I can't say that Chris Bledsoe is on it, but from context clues and things like that, I think he's going to be on that show. There was someone else on this channel on one of the maybe two live streams ago who announced a project that they were going to go on. I'm not going to say the person because I don't want to link it explicitly, but I want to provide you guys with enough context to figure it out. He's also going to be on Beyond Skinwalker. And I said he, so you can figure that one out too. So someone on my channel was contacted by the History Channel, because of a video that was produced on this channel, and the rest is history. So again, enough context clues for folks who've been following this channel for a long time. So 2 people who have been interviewed are definitely on it. I'm sure there's probably more. I was I randomly turned on Ancient Aliens the other day, and there was Preston Dennett. So it's crazy how this thing, anyway, this thing is, I feel like I don't have the metrics to show it, but it's kind of taken on a life of its own. So let's get out of that and just make sure I'm doing everything the way I like it. Anyway, no comments. Oh man, I don't know. I probably went on too long. Like, why is this guy talking about his like grandiose vision? He's and then after you hear what I say later on, you're gonna be like, this guy's nuts. He's crazy. So anyway, all right, there. That jogged a comment. Flat-brained. Was that a Lynn Buchanan episode? Can Moonman, can you give me some more context? If you give me more context, I can probably figure it out. It sounds like either it's a Lynn Buchanan episode or a David Morehouse episode. Okay, I actually showed this. I've tried some of that. Like Jack Connor's been on here. In fact, I was trying every time I'm about the live stream, I always invite him to come on. He's just like, I want to be on, but I have like a friend's over that night. So I tried that again. But I also I asked Alex Ferrari once, and like, I mean, his people got at that scale. They have people, right? That they let's see. Yeah, but I'm starting to get high demand guests. Like Chris Bledsoe is going to be, by the end of this summer, he will be a nationally known entity. Like people who don't follow this topic, well, that's my prediction. And post disclosure, that's the other thing I didn't talk about. That is where there's yeah, I will try to do some more of that. But I think what'll happen is if this disclosure thing actually does happen in any way, there'll be a lot of interest in some of these personalities. And I've been very diligent about doing things the right way, like tagging and having search terms and all that stuff, and playlists. And so let's see. It has got to be Lynn Buchanan. It's one of the 4 Lynn Buchanan episodes for sure. It's probably the last one that I did. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the next shoe to drop. I don't think we understand how time works. We just have no clue. Or maybe we have a clue. That's the other thing too. The people who work with Chris Bledsoe, I asked him in my interview about the The Adjustment Bureau. There's a movie. It's like a 2011 Matt Damon movie called The Adjustment Bureau. And I asked him, I heard in another interview that he mentioned it as something like a good show that describes what the nature of reality is, or a good movie that describes the nature of the reality. In my interview, he said that the intelligence community basically wrote that movie, or at least heavily contributed to it. So the one thing about the movie that seems a little bit self-serving to me, though, is there's this concept of destiny, and we're all kind of operating according to a script. There are entities that come and readjust us or adjust us to make sure we're on the right path. But the thing that is a little bit self-serving is that it starts out with this senator who's supposed to become president and this and that, which is kind of a reinforcement mechanism that the existing structures of society are there and are meant to be unaltered, because the people who are in those places are meant to be in those places. Now, if you look around and you look at our political leadership, that's no, no. There's some range of free will and things like that, but no, those people are not destined to lead because they're not good leaders. At least most of them. Some of them are okay, but that makes total sense. He was into the I Ching and all that stuff. The Man in the High Castle, he wrote using the I Ching, according to Tim Powers, who was his friend. So I did interview on this podcast. So Philip K. Dick was an interesting character, and is kind of borderline crazy, but I think he knew a lot more about reality than most people think. Yeah, well, I'm assuming by entropy, right? Like how can organisms evolve if the universe trends toward entropy, right? It doesn't. It's like the opposite, and that's not something I don't think scientists can really answer today. They're just like, but man, yeah, that's totally fair. Totally fair. I looked into it, okay? And I'm not saying I won't do it, but every interview he has is like 5 to 20 minutes, 20 minutes max. And the one thing that he does is he's got these things called Busey-isms, which are just like, come on. He takes like the word love means living only versions of everything, or something like he'll just take the initials and just make up, and it's just like, come on. Like I have more respect for you guys. I can't. But Brian, we'll talk like this weekend on the call. I'm open to hearing your best argument and a strategy for how we can manage that. And that's if he says yes, right? So like I'm going to have to develop a strategy for getting to him and getting through all the hordes of agents and things like that. So let's see. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, take a hummingbird, for instance, right? It might work though, right? Like it might work. I'd be like, why is he talking to Gary Busey? It's kind of weird. I don't give yourself more credit, man. Like you're the one who recommended Ryan Macbeth, and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. And Ryan Macbeth was like, yeah, I'll do it. I mean, he was totally cool about it. Like that was your idea. That wouldn't have happened without you. Literally, it wouldn't have happened. Like I wouldn't have even thought about that. So I mean, don't knock yourself, man. I mean, it's crazy, but sometimes crazy works. Let's see. Yeah, he had a lot of lady problems. He was attracted to crazy ladies. I mean, no, really. Like there are stories. So Yeah. Well, that's. I guess it's better than hope. It's better than the bottle of hope. Okay. So, all right. Well, where are we? Okay. This will be quick. All right. So, current projects. So, you know where I stand on the channel. I have one more chapter in a novel that I'm writing. I just have to get to it. I submitted some more short story stuff. Weird World War China is set to come out in 2024, but it's done. Like it's done. I just have to go through the whole copy editing process and all that stuff. But I turned it in I think in February. So that's kind of where I stand. I'm going to Liberty Con in kind of toward the tail end of June. Two people I interview in June. It's already set up are Tom Campbell and Gary Nolan. Again, I haven't done those interviews yet, but I think I do both in the first half of June. So we'll see. I think it'll probably be right before or right after a disclosure event, maybe. But I don't want to get too I don't want to get too optimistic about it because this has happened before. So anyway, all right. Uh, hmm. The next thing that I want to do, and I want to be careful, or not careful, but I want to be thoughtful about how I do this. Just give me a second. All right. All right. So this is I'll be, this is a good time for me to be responding to comments and things like that. But one thing, like I said, I do every May is I honor a friend who went to my high school. He was in my class, and he went to West Point. He went into the Army, and I saw him again. He showed up into my regiment, which is the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, right when I was getting out of the Army, and he was paired with my sister uh, company. Right, there's a company called Alpha Troop, and there was a sister company, and that was in the first squadron of the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. In the second squadron, there was Echo Troop. Echo Troop uh, was also deployed to Los Angeles right after 9/11 as a uh, quick reaction force in case there were other terror attacks. So he took command of Echo Troop when I was leaving the Army. I went, said, got to talk to him one last time. I remember asking some of his soldiers about him, and you know how soldiers are. Like they're just like, "Hey, sir, I was telling the commander about you know, Joey was screwing the first sergeant's wife and this and that," and they just like joking like inappropriately and stuff like that. But I was fine with them talking to me that way because they're they'll talk to you about anything if you kind of don't if you're not judgy. But he said that uh, my friend Jay Harding was like a better human being than most of us, but like super honorable, integrity, high standards, and he just didn't have like that low frequency humor, and like he just expected better of his soldiers. So, but anyway, he's a great human being. So I'm just I'm gonna play this thing. It's gonna run for a little bit. Feel free to ask questions, but it's actually better if you put comments on. So I my uh, my eyes stay dry. So all right. Um, so that's what this is about. And let's see. Again, bear with me. This is the mark of a good leader. Notice that he gives his soldiers the credit, not himself. There's very little of that right now. He died checking vehicles for car bombs, and he was commanding Echo Troop. He was about to turn the troop over to another captain, and like any good leader, he was checking the cars himself personally. He wasn't assigning it to somebody. He wasn't telling somebody else to do it. He led by example, and he didn't have to do it. He was turning over the company to somebody else. But he cared that much about his men that he was willing to put himself in harm's way day after day, month after month. And that's just the type of human being he was. All right. Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate it. Oh man, I can't look. I didn't do. I was all stateside. I never had to deal with any of that stuff. But I couldn't imagine just couldn't imagine having to do that, man. Thank you. Look, I just chose the music. I didn't, and there's probably better music on the original video, but obviously I couldn't use. Well, I didn't want to risk it, so thank you. All right, let's change. I don't know if this is really going to change the tone, but my apologies. Okay, let's. Yeah, thank you. Just remember, Memorial Day is for the fallen. It's not for veterans. It's for veterans who've fallen. So, when you see veterans, thank them for their service, but just remember their friends, the people who didn't come back. Okay. All right. So coincidences and general weirdness. So if you're following my community tab, I interviewed Mike Clellan, and then of course I had an owl dream, right? And again, that's just your subconscious is flooding with that stuff. So that's to be expected. But and look, I'm not seeing anything weird, but there's just lots of weird stuff happening with nature and things like that. Like hummingbirds, right? I see hummingbird every day. I saw 2 today. and they fly within 5 feet of me. Dragonflies, that stuff. I was talking to Mike Clellan about it in our first interview, or not in our first, but during when we were recording the interviews, and I kept telling him I keep seeing all these hummingbirds, and then in the middle of the interview, he's like, "There's a hummingbird at the window." So like just stupid little stuff like that. That the weirdest it got was right before the Bledsoe interview. So I sometimes hear owls, early in the morning, sometimes at night, but I've never seen one. And, where I live, they're here, but I've never seen one here. And that's, call it, Northern California. I hear them from time to time. But in the owl dream that I had, I didn't remember the dream until I heard one of the owls hooting. I'm like, oh, I had an owl dream. Another night, I came down to this room while the lights were out, and I just looked at kind of opened the window. Everything was kind of blacked out inside here. And I saw like this just wing fly by at night. And then I opened another window that's just facing the area behind me. And as soon as I opened it, I saw the full wingspan of this massive owl just fly by. Again, mind you, this is right before the Bledsoe interview, or the night before. And while I'm, reading or finishing up his book, because I was, kind of racing to finish it up, I hear these hoots outside, and they're hooting the entire time I'm reading the book. I go outside, listen to them for a little bit, and then I go back in, I listen to the book. Then I start hearing two owls hooting that way. The next morning, I looked up those calls out of there's 7 different species of owls that live where I am. And those hoots were the hoots of great horned owls. So anyway, I'm reading the book that night, and I'm like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to record the sounds of these owls, because there were 2 of them. And the moment I finished reading that book, they just stopped. And I haven't heard them since. So just weird kind of stuff. Trying to think what else. And then as I kind of, when I interviewed Beitman, he recommended that, I told him about all these weird coincidences about who I'm connected to and things like that. It doesn't seem random. It seems just strange. So he asked me to build, just to kind of do something like this. I don't know if you can see this, but this is just a graphical representation of just people I've met in my life, and then what subsequently happens to them. So what I did, though, is I grouped it by industry or by field. So I have a huge cluster in national security, a smaller cluster in Hollywood, a cluster in finance, as you would expect, because I worked in finance, a cluster in kind of general industry, and that would be like the Brendan Whitworth sort of thing. As another example, if you were following the demise of First Republic Bank, I know the son of the founder. He was my office mate when I worked in banking. Like a GameStop, I know I used to work with the current CFO. I had no reason to believe that she would become the CFO of GameStop, but she is. That's kind of the industry side. There's also a science and technology component. So my daughter was one of those Scholastic kid reporters way back in 2014. And as one of her assignments, she got to interview Kip Thorne. And, if you're all following, he's like the LIGO guy who won the Nobel Prize in 2017 for essentially proving that gravity was a wave. There's a bunch of others, like Tiger Woods was in my history class undergrad. I didn't show up, but he was there. Reese Witherspoon lived on the same floor as my wife, who, girlfriend, who became my wife. It's just the Hollywood one is much thinner. But uh, when I was at business school, our student speaker was uh, what's his name? Hank Paulson, who was the Treasury Secretary during the financial crisis, but it was before he he was when he was the CEO of Goldman Sachs. It was before he became the Treasury Secretary, but he ended up in that crisis. There are other people that you've seen already on the channel. You know about my thesis advisor, right? He became Obama's Secretary of Defense. I was Biden when he was senator, his primary nominee for the Air Force Academy. He became the president of the United States. When I invested in, was doing investments for a particular thing, I once had a meeting in 2008 or 2009 with Jared Kushner, and I recommended that we not go with that fund. But that's neither here nor there. But like I didn't know, I just thought he was some rich guy. I had no idea that he would, do kind of work in the future political administration. I have a lot of these weird brush encounters with these people, and that's not entirely explainable to where I went to school. Some of it is, but there's a lot of weirdness going on. Like I feel like the Adjustment Bureau, it kind of fits in. It's kind of like that seems real to me because it's just it's so wild, it's so crazy that this stuff happens. So anyway, there's a bunch of other ones that I didn't go through or name, and I'm sure there's many more that we don't know yet. But it seems like all those industries are like specific for a reason. Like there's some reason that was meant to happen. I have no idea what it is, but they're very specific: science, technology, finance, government, some generic industry. But they all intersect on this topic, if that makes any sense. So, all right, let me go to the. At this point, I think we can go to questions. I think I've gone so woo that people are like, this guy's crazy. Yeah, yeah. Um, here's another one. So in the course that one of the courses that I work with at this school, I start reading this case about this business that started, and I read about the CEO and like the co-CEOs, and I know both of them. Like I mean, I'm not great friends with them, but I know both of them. So the next day or the same week, I'm doing work for a company, and they sent me their cap table, which is like who owns shares and stuff like that. One of those guys was on the cap table, uh, right? Just completely random. Oh, maybe not so random, but it's just so I reached out to him because I was curious. Maybe that's a signal, but he didn't respond. So it is what it is. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So, what questions do folks have? I know I went a little bit too long and crazy on some of this stuff. Nothing. All right. Well, what's the over under on disclosure this year? What do people think? Yay, nay, just yes, no. I like that they're night hunters. I like that they're kind of quiet, stealthy, and they can navigate in the complete darkness. I think they're also a sign of, at least in myth and legend, they're messengers between, this reality and higher realities and things like that. So I think that's interesting. I think it's a little creepy, but then you have like Athena, right? The symbol of, I think the owl was her symbol. It represents wisdom and kind of higher knowledge. I got along with him really well, actually. He is, so the first part is on the biological mechanisms of remote viewing that he's kind of intuited from his own personal journey. So like when he has a certain feeling, he goes within himself and asks, like, where did that come from? What part of, and he's isolated some of this stuff to certain parts of the brain. Um, but that's the first interview. We talk about how he got into remote viewing and his study of that. The second part is on more esoteric targets. So we talk about the game of function thing first. Then we talk about a Mayan pyramid. Saint Mary Magdalene also did a remote viewing of that. So we talk about various targets. There might be another one, but oh yeah. There's a project in Italy under a mountain where they look for weakly interacting subatomic particles or something like that. There's like an M. They're called WIMPs, like WIMPs, but they're meant to look at the interaction of dark matter with the universe. So that one's pretty interesting too. So we go through, I think, those four things. Yeah, yeah. Well, here's another story. Like again, like I can't verify any of this. So one morning, a month or so ago, my wife and children were traveling, looking at schools for my son, and I was here alone. And at like 3:40 or something, like 3:40, 3:45, I just woke up from a dead sleep, and I felt like I had the feeling that there was a presence. Saw nothing, heard nothing, and like within immediately there was a pack of coyotes that just went ballistic outside. It felt like they were 100 feet from my bedroom window. It was just weird. But again, like, just be, I'm home alone and nerves, right? But it was just really weird. Maybe I sensed the coyotes, but it was really bizarre. Yeah, yeah. Foxes, yeah, and foxes are not. They don't come out. Like they're pretty secretive. Yeah, he does. There's also a channel called Crypto Viewing that I think he participates in with those guys. So like Daz is awesome. I've interviewed him. I really like him. Dick, I have not interviewed, but I've seen some of his remote viewing, and he seems to be extremely talented. But maybe I should put him on the list. I haven't spoken to him yet. But they do this stuff like once a week on crypto viewing. It happens so fast and furious. I think there's a Patreon account that they do, but it's so fast and furious that they rarely look back. It's almost by fluke that Reardon went back and looked at that remote viewing uh, after the pandemic or during the pandemic. All right, still disclosure. Let me get rid of this thing. What do people think about disclosure? Is it coming? Yes or no? Nothing. Any guests people want me to talk to? Yeah, I mean everybody right now, people who are at least in this field are saying it's this summer. Interesting. Yeah, but now inquiring minds want to know, Moon Man. What were you told back in 2011 that there was going to be disclosure in 2011, or that there was going to be disclosure around this time frame? Yeah, I'm I'm cautiously optimistic, but knowing how, I mean, I mean, these guys can't even raise interest rates at a pace that doesn't potentially cause a banking collapse. So I don't know if they're going to be that buttoned up to do something like this. Yeah, yeah, I know. I don't. I bet you he won't talk to me. Um, so here's the interesting thing. Two people I've talked to, um, they had physical evidence. So uh, why am I like Terry Lovelace had an iPhone that showed the pressure sensor showed that he rose 60 feet above his bed because it was in his pocket or something like that. And he gave it to Lou, I think, well, whatever the organization that Lou represents, for analysis. He still hasn't gotten it back. I'm not saying he's not going to get it back, but I also spoke with um, Chris Bledsoe, and there was some molten metal that comes off of these orbs, and he gave that to the same organization in Lou, and they didn't give it back. It was classified as soon as they received it. So, look, I would love to interview him. I'd love to give him a chance, but he used to be a counterintelligence guy, and I know he's kind of open. He's kind of operating in the open like that, but it feels like he part of his job may have been, or part of his mandate may have been, because he was a DoD employee all the while. I think doing the stuff right. He still had an ID card, all that stuff. So he may have been around as a still doing counterintelligence stuff. Like people say, "Oh, I saw something." He goes and investigates it, takes the physical materials and sends them back, has them analyzed, and then classified. They're no longer in the world. So, and then I was also told by somebody that he was like super all about national security. So his lens is very focused on, and again, fairly, right? That's his role. But and look, I used to be that way too, but I, and I have strong respect for the military and intelligence industrial complex. I think that's probably the only competent arm of government. But the politicians that give them the orders, I have zero faith. I think they're a clown show. I'm not. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't even know how to contact him. Whitley Strieber was saying on a show today that Whitley's tried to invite him to talk on his show, and he won't do it. So, and I think the rationale that came out around that is they didn't want to make by appearing on Whitley's show, he would demonstrate that there was a link between the nuts and bolts aspect of the UFO phenomenon and the abductions, and he didn't want to be associated with that. Now, in private, he certainly deals with that kind of stuff, but maybe he just doesn't want to explicitly. Anyway, I would love to interview him, Lou. If by some fluke you're watching this, you have a standing, invitation and all that stuff. Uh, and look, I'm pretty easy to talk to. I'll ask pretty transparent questions. Like I will ask you. I mean, maybe I wouldn't ask that question because I don't want you to have to lie to me. If you're continuing to work, because again, I get it. I understand why that would happen if something's classified. I don't want to get in the way of that, but because there may be a good reason. I don't know. But anyway, yeah. Well, even John Yost said something was going to happen in his lifetime, something big. Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. too. Like it's not like they're going to be like, yes, we've been lying for all these years. There have been 119 at least 119 crashes, crash retrievals, according to Leo Stringfield way back when, and we recovered all of them. I actually think Whitley Strieber has probably the best. If you read them, I think like they're still having meetings today where it's pencils up. Like you can't write things down about it. So I think that every generation rediscovers this stuff internally in the defense community because there's no good records of it. So I think part of this reason why hasn't been disclosure yet, and we don't know more about this, is because of sheer like keeping secrecy, and competence sort of thing. Like, who knows? And I think somebody put in like a GAO request, Government Accountability Office, and the Pentagon for all these records, and the result they got back was they were all destroyed. So I don't know. But yeah, I think, Frank, it could be like a soft thing. By the way, go to Bledsoe's Instagram account. Oh my God. Like there's some crazy stuff on it because he just records these orbs. And anyway, there's some weird stuff in there. So definitely check it out. Like it's what he's experiencing is real. I don't know what it is, but it's real. Oh yeah, I'd be super respectful with him. I'd be super careful. In fact, like a lot of those questions, I've had other guests who I've asked certain questions to, and their reactions were like, they reacted, but they didn't say anything. And I'm like, okay, you can't talk about that. Like your day job is X. Okay, I get it. And sometimes it's just like Russia, Ukraine, but even the UFO thing, I've asked certain people who work on things where if this thing were a real thing, they have means of, they would see it. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but they didn't say anything like, but it was obvious that they couldn't talk about it. Yeah. I think that's what's happening. I think the lady is basically predicted this event and some other things too that he can't talk about. And the government's being dragged kicking and screaming. Like they can't cover it up. They won't be able to cover it up. And I think anybody who's invested in this topic should be trying to engage with whatever this phenomena is personally, because I don't think this is like a Martin Luther moment, right? The government is not going to intercede between you and the phenomenon, right? They're just not. They haven't been doing their job for 50 years, so it's better to take the risk and find out if it's safe or not. I mean, you might find out the hard way that it's not safe, but they're not giving us any information on how to deal with it. So, do it on your own, because if they obviously haven't been protecting people, at least as far as I know, given the stories, and there's so much misinformation out there that who knows. So at this point, it's just like, I think the phenomenon is going to be the driver of this. And I think Whitley Strieber is saying the same thing in his book, Them. Yeah. Do you want to, Moon Man, do you want to say that? Yeah. Panpsychism. You used a term, you said something, it was like, it involved panpsychism and something else. It was like 3 words, the panpsychism something. Feel free to put that in the chat. I'm not going to say it out loud, but that's some crazy stuff. Yeah. Yeah, they don't know the public guys don't know what's going on. I don't think they have. I think some of this is buried so deep in corporations that the corporations they have no incentive to share this knowledge. So I would be surprised if the Secretary of Defense knows much of anything. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've always been curious, like, how did he Danny something, right? Like, I don't know how long he's been doing it, but how's he the other one is Kurt Mungle. Like, he gets some amazing guests, and kind of like Danny I can see a little bit more, but Kurt Mungle, he's just like I, and I don't want it to be disparaging because he gets great guests and he's been very successful in his podcast, but he's just look, I don't have charisma either, but like, like that guy's another level. Anyway, that's kind of a backhanded, like, very successful channel. Good for him. Good for him. Oh, that's the other thing that what's his name said. John Ramirez. By the way, if there's any way I could contact him, I would love to talk to him. I don't have his contact information. I don't even know where to find it. But he said that he used to look at like aerial stuff, like signals intelligence, things like that, radars, and he said on the S-300, which is the Russian or back then Soviet air defense system. I think now they're up to S-400s or S-500s that they're like are scheduled to come online soon. I'd have to check, but on the S-300, he said that there is a mode called literally called UFO mode. Like, it can just track really fast targets. I don't know if that's a euphemism or if there's a reason for that, right? I.e., the euphemism could just be they're really fast targets, so we'll just call it something crazy like UFO mode, or if they were meant to track things that are moving at those velocities. Yeah, that's true. The problem is you'd never get it imported into the United States. It would have to be into some third party uh, country. There used to be a guy out in Northern California. He was he was like a billionaire. He's a member of like some billionaire family. His name was Jacques Littlefield, and he had this massive tank farm in Northern California where he had all these tanks. But and then I think one time he acquired a Scud missile, and he had to completely disarm it and like put it through U.S. Customs in a very specific way so that he could have that Scud missile launcher, not Scud missile, but Scud missile launcher in his tank farm. But when he died, his wife hated that stuff, so it went to a bunch of different museums in the U.S. throughout the U.S. But I definitely got to see it once. He had all these T-34 Russian tanks and all sorts of great stuff. But it's too bad. Any space-time metric engineering? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, because you can see what frequencies they're using and what it's reflecting. Um, yeah, you just see a entirely different range of what's the word for it? Uh, you see a much broader electromagnetic spectrum than you would see it just like visibly. Interesting. Well, same thing with like NASA photos. Like, they airbrush stuff routinely. Huh. Yeah, they're like, I know the Navy encountered them in off the coast of the Atlantic, but like Bledsoe's home is where they appeared. But I mean, I think at this point they've kind of followed him because he moved. He moved to like a smaller cabin, and this is just based on the book. It's not like I have any. I don't know much about his family or anything, but they still show up. Like, he had here's another weird story. You can actually see a photo of this on his Instagram account. He like left, and as soon as he got home, he felt that he suddenly had a horrible feeling, and his dog had been hit by a car. There was an orb that appeared that had like his dog's face in it after the dog had died. And I swear to God, it is on his Instagram account. Like, there's some there's also a connection between the living and the dead that I think we just like. Death is not really death, it's a transformation into something else. But yeah, I mean, there's some weird stuff. Yeah, the panpsychic catastrophe. I'm guessing what that means is like psychism is a term that means that everything has consciousness. I think, and Moonman, correct me if I'm wrong, because as soon as you told me that offline, I'm like, I need to look this up, um, because I think you were also looking at what is it, ontic structural realism or something like that as a model of reality. So I went to the Stanford website. There's like a philosophy section where you can look up some of these things, but it's almost like I don't quite know what that means, but if I put the two together, it's almost like there's a ontic structural realism. Again, I'm not the philosophy guy. I'm too dumb to be a philosophy major. So if I'm wrong, correct me. But I think it just says it's not the form that reality is; it's just the structure of reality. So the form uh, that's about the extent that I can explain it. And I personally don't understand that at all. I don't know. I don't really understand. Like I would have to spend a good. I can't skim it for 5 minutes, which is what I did. But I have to spend a good hour trying to fully understand or comprehend what that means. I'm going to tell you about a story about three-letter agencies. So I did my master's thesis on Iran's nuclear program, like how to stop it, and if we don't stop it, how to counter it once it exists. Like, what's the strategy if they get nuclear weapons? And it was my master's thesis. My advisor was Ash Carter, who became Obama Secretary of Defense, and but this is long. But this is like 8 years before he became SecDef. And my client was number three at the State Department. It was Nick Burns. So I just put this thing together, just developed the best strategy I could, and then I have friends who back then were, you know, in intelligence circles. Uh, they're, this particular person is not now, but he had, for whatever reason, reached out to people and asked for the best open source reports, strategies that were out there regarding the Iran nuclear problem. And he said not every, but multiple three-letter agencies, he never said who, sent him a copy of my master's thesis. Like, there's, yeah, like, it's kind of creepy. It's not creepy, but I'm actually I'm kind of proud of that. But you interact in the world in far greater ways than you could possibly imagine. That's kind of the takeaway for that. And that's like 2006, way back, way back. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is still the most common, and it's a good system too. Um, it's a very good system. It's kind of why you're not seeing a lot of aerial stuff between the Ukrainians and the Russians, because the Ukrainians have it too. Interesting. Yeah, there's so much stuff that we just, huh? Yeah, I've heard about the phantoms and cosmics, but I haven't delved into it, and I definitely need to check out the Chris Lato podcast because it shows up as a comp for one of my for where my audience goes. So I definitely need to do my research on him. I'm correct about what? Sorry, I'm like trying to. Yeah. Okay, the ontic structural realism. Wow. Huh. I I mean, I think this literally goes back to the ontic structural reality thing that I was talking about with Moon Man. I I think our brains are too primitive to process some of the things that we see, and I think whatever these beings or this level of reality is, they can influence what we see and how we see them. And I think Chris Bledsoe said something to the effect of, if they showed us like truly what they were, we'd probably have heart attacks just because our monkey minds aren't capable of fully processing the reality. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, I still have my jacket from Skinwalker Ranch when I went to visit is still sitting on my table because it smells like fire. Because the wind blew a chair into the fire at me. So and we were sleeping. It was so cold that we had our jackets on when we were sleeping. So I smell like you know campfire, or the jacket does. I don't. It was back in November, so it's been some time. Incidentally, that conference that I'm going to, LibertyCon, I think Travis Taylor is going to be a guest of honor because he also works with my publisher. So, uh, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But he just doesn't respond to email. Like that's like a thing with him apparently. So, because I've sent him many emails. So I'll keep trying. I'll eventually interact with him at some point. Hopefully, it's during that period of time. Anyway, how are we doing on time? This is what drives me nuts. Like the peak of like people viewing this, at least during the live streams, is like an hour and a half into it. So I'm always torn as to when I should end it because this is where all the meat is, and you guys are supplying me with really fascinating details and questions that we can talk about. And here's the other thing too, and I we covered this in the Steve Bassett interview. Let's say there is some sort of disclosure. Like, has anybody thought through post disclosure? I mean, it's just like, we obviously haven't thought through like the impact of the sanctions on Russia and what it would do, even though it was patently obvious to anyone with a brain what would happen. You get inflation, fuel prices would go up. I expected some starvation too, and thankfully that didn't happen because of the grain supply and things like that in Ukraine. But if those people can't even freaking plan, something that's patently obvious, like I have zero confidence that anybody's thought through post disclosure and what that world would look like. And that's what I'm more worried about. Let's see. It depends, right? It depends. I mean, I expect that they will because it'll still be. I think it'll be like an arm's length sort of relationship between humanity and whatever's out there, right? Like because I don't think their intent is to allow human civilization to collapse. But and the other part of me is I think back to the Lynn Buchanan thing about the 75% decline in the human population, right? That could be that maybe the carrying capacity of this planet is already too much, and maybe there's some sort of a plan to pick us up and seed us somewhere else, and that's where that population goes. I doubt it, but I don't like. I'm literally. I have no data to back any of these things up. I'm just wildly speculating. No, Giorgiani's book. I have not. Tell me more about that. Yeah, that's the thing too. Like, who? I mean, if somebody wanted to take over the planet, then like you wouldn't come in like that with Independence Day and just like wipe. You would kind of do things to demonstrate how incompetent our leadership is, which is like every single day there's something else, something new. So I interesting. I'll have to check it out. I still need to read Passports to Magonia from Jacques Vallée. I have that on my I have a huge pile of to be read lists. I'm not a fast reader, so huh. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I hope not. Huh. Yeah, but I mean, like something like that, you get them to surrender, but like those things would not last because, you know, uh, if the Chinese did that, uh, I mean, I would be running guerrilla campaigns against them until I died. Like I wouldn't care. I'm not. I'm all about freedom. Like I would not want to surrender to a regime like that. No, no way, ever. Yeah. It could also be that they started taking all these biological samples back in the 40s and 50s because there was a risk that we destroy ourselves through nuclear war. So maybe they were just trying to make sure they had enough biological sampling to reconstitute humanity if we destroyed ourselves. Again, I'm thinking like a human, which, we're not dealing with human minds here. So, yeah. Oh, I think crypto blockchain. I think the government. I think governments use that for black ops to fund black ops and things like that. It's perfect for that sort of thing. Um, I don't know if it's just to keep track of things, but if we had like a digital currency, uh, that would absolutely give the government the ability to track every transaction you have. Like, oh, you're getting too heavy, so you're not allowed to have meat for the next 5 days. So whenever you try to buy meat, it's just your credit card's just gonna be declined, right? That's the kind of crap that because every time you give these clowns any control, they take it and then they just make it 50 times worse. Yeah, that's right. But even then, like Facebook can, based on your clicks, knows when you're gonna take a dump, right? It'll be like, oh, like right before it usually stands up or does this or that. Like it's because it's machine learning, so it doesn't really need a causal chain. It just recognizes patterns and will recognize really strange sequences that a human wouldn't recognize, and then have a predictive algorithm that would figure out what you're going to do next. It's really creepy stuff, and that's another reason why I think there's a chance for something to be disclosed because we're at a tipping point right now. AI is it's going to get faster than our monkey minds realize. And pretty soon you're going to have highly educated people who can't get jobs if it's not handled properly. Now, you're going to have a whole industry of people who support AI and make sure it's working properly and things like that. But But even then, there are problems, right? Like you saw on the last live stream I did, that I looked up my own bio, and I was an anti-capitalist philosopher who'd written 3 books on those topics, and I lived in Virginia, right? Like there's not anybody with my name anywhere in the world that has those things. So it's like where did the AI get that? Like it was completely wrong. Completely wrong. And it was like the opposite of like where I stand philosophically. I mean, it's almost a parody of me. But uh, you know, so if people blindly trust this thing like religion, we're in trouble. All right, I think I'm up to date. So, if there is disclosure, what do you think would be disclosed? I know Frank has said it's like there's going to be like, yeah, there's some orbs, like mind your own business, right? Good luck with it. It's not a threat. It's totally fine. Totally fine. Don't worry about it. Um, does anybody think it'll be a little bit more substantive, like beans and bullets, like actual entities, things like that? Not actual entities, but like physical meat space type stuff. No? All right. Oh, there we go. Yeah, probably. I mean, they haven't really given us reason to, you know, to have a good feeling about what they put out. Yeah. Yeah. And I think if there are crash retrievals, I think that's exactly what it is. I think it's just seed tech. It's like, if you have the technology to travel 50 million light years in 2 hours, right? Like, you're not going to crash, uh, you know. And I think they crash these grays because they're biological entities, or they're biological robots. So they're not. I don't know. What do you mean by rug pull? Yeah, as in like pull the rug under. Who the government or the entities? Yeah, absolutely. Because you have the extreme woo side where people are talking about channeling Palladians and like for entities from the Pleiades and this and that. Like you get some really weird stuff. And then you have like the nuts and bolts guys who are just like they're definitely ETs. They're coming from space. They're in metallic ships. I don't think it's that, and I don't think it's this crazy trans channeling thing. But I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm more skeptical of those things because they're harder to prove or claim. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I would need to, and I'd be willing to interview people on the channel to talk about it. But um I already feel like I'm kind of going down a path that I could be easily psyoped into believing something that's not true. Yeah, yeah, like no, the alien invasion kind of thing. That could be the alien, whatever the alien invasion narrative. I think it's I think it's part of all this. I think. All right, here's like 3 things I put together that may or may not be true. So yeah, they would. And Maxwell's equations are freely available now, and Yeah, they would classify it, even though there's not. It just talks about how the strong force, the weak force, and the electromagnetic force all kind of work together. The gravitational force is the one that people are struggling to. But I think there's something to sonics, or I think what's the right word for it. I think model of reality is that I mean this part's true. We're all light and sound vibrating at very high frequencies. 98.99% of us is empty space. So you're made up of photons and phonons. Phonons are just units of vibrational frequency. So what you would say is or vibrational. Yeah, there's like vibrational units of vibration. So sound, basically, at the quantum scale. And I think and they're defined by de Broglie's equation, which is why you have quantum tunneling, right? You can have, like, if you have a quark that's here, it could teleport to the other side of the room, right? There's a probability that it could, but the probability that your desk would teleport to another side of the room is like one, 5 times the 1 in 5 times the age of the entire universe, or something like that. But I think what's happening is our reality is we're tuned to a certain frequency, right? So you talk about the Schumann resonance, right, which is the 7.83 hertz, whatever it is. But this frequency thing goes kind of all the way up when you're talking about planetary movements and things like that, and all the way down. And the lower you get, the faster the vibrational frequency. I think other beings, other realities resonate at higher frequencies, or they could be on other channels, which is how you could have simultaneous time. You're just turning to a channel, a higher frequency. But if you think about a model of a higher frequency, if you have a fan and it's slowly turning, you can see the blades. But if it accelerates to a frequency that's extremely fast, you'll eventually won't see it. You'll just see right through it. And I think there is a model of reality that, I don't know if atoms vibrate this way. Probably not. It might be some other subatomic particle or something like that. That there are beings that just resonate at a far higher frequency that we just can't see, but they're interacting with us constantly. They move faster than we do. They don't. If you look at a hummingbird, you can barely see its wings, but its heart's beating so fast as to constantly eat to stay alive and to constantly stay in motion. So, I think there's something to that. If you look at and again, the way sounds related to all this stuff is you look at crop circles, right? And I'm not talking about the hoax crop circles, but the ones where the stalks don't break, right? They just bend, and they have these really intricate frequencies. Well, if you use certain sound frequencies on water, you have very deliberate patterns that emerge. So one possibility for these crop circles is not that they're a message or intricate geometric patterns. It might be that that like a craft moves by resonating sound. And when you resonate sound, it might have an impact on the grass and form these patterns, much like patterns would be formed in water. The other thing that's closely associated with UFOs is that typically you don't hear any sound with animals, but there's often an intense fear that humans feel, but infrasonic frequencies do that to people, right? Infrasound, so sound below, I think somewhat below 20 hertz that you can't hear. But like if you're near Big Sur and you hear the crashings of the wave and things like that, like people hallucinate at those frequencies, and they also sometimes experience intense fear that is not often explained by an external stimulus, i.e., synthetic fear. So it's almost like these craft might manipulate sound in such a way that they can move mass. If you look at phonons, they're theorized, they're subatomic units of vibrational units. They have negative mass and also experience negative gravity. So the faster they resonate, you basically have anti-gravity. So anyway, again, I'm making this stuff up off the top of my head based on things that I put together. I'm probably completely off my rocker and wrong. Um, all right, let's see. Yeah, they could do that, like, and just capture people, right, and then completely discredit them. Yep. Let's see. Okay, I'm still. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. All right, how we doing? I'm talking, but I'm not getting any questions, but people aren't dropping, which is interesting. I'm not going to ask you who told you that. I think I have an idea, but um, I mean, you did have a comment up earlier, and if people are well versed in this field, they'll be able to figure it out. But I'm not gonna get you in any trouble. Huh? The Wheeler Feynman. So that's like the Wheeler from Princeton, and then Feynman is the Caltech guy, Richard Feynman, I think. I will have to look that up because I don't know what the Wheeler Feynman absorber advanced waves are. But yeah, it's almost as if we figured some of this stuff out and we're not sharing it, or the government's not sharing it. And I can understand why, right? They don't want a peer competitor to come up with the same thing. But I mean, if they've unlocked like free energy, like 0 point energy and things like that, and they did that in the 1960s, like somebody should be hanged. Like that's just after all the damage that we've done to the planet with fossil fuels and things like that. Like that is, but that's the problem. If they did do that, then you kind of have to let them go. You kind of have to just, otherwise, the disclosure will never happen because somebody doesn't want to be annihilated. Yeah, I think the government is running around with its pants down right now. I think they are scrambling to disclose because uh, if they don't, they're not going to, they basically don't have a choice. So they need to get ahead of it. And if they don't get ahead of it, it will be a disaster for credibility. Oh, I think that's the analog science fiction and fact magazine article that was back in like the 1980s or something like that. And then the author of the article kind of disappeared. He just never showed up again. Oh, I mean, Chris Bledsoe alluded it to me. I think the phenomena is just it's going to start revealing itself to people in mass numbers and potentially on an individual level. And the government has known about this for quite some time, but they kept it quiet. And if they don't do something soon, they're not going to have any credibility left. Because I mean, it's going to freak a large number of people out who are just going about their day to day job, like day to day, and then they have like a very intense and personal sighting that if you're not grounded, right, like this stuff will manifest bad stuff if you're not well grounded. It kind of depends on how you're grounded. If you're in an optimistic mindset, you'll see things that are pleasant. But if you're not, uh, you know, they're called angels and demons for a reason, at least back in the day. So, yeah, and if the government's not there to kind of warn people, uh, and every day their credibility keeps not on this subject, but just across the board keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Yeah, I mean it's well, I mean it depends. Like Stefan Schwartz thinks China gets a little bit more powerful, but I think Lynn Buchanan's view is like if this is all true and the government keeps adding regulation and stuff like that, I think people will not like violently revolt, but just say, you know what, go f yourself. We're not paying. We don't need you anymore. We can handle ourselves. So I don't think it breaks down, but I think if there are, let's say it's a little bit more conventional. Let's say there's like a galactic council and we're welcomed into some greater consciousness. I think the nation state does break down in that case. And I think it's just people will start identifying with this higher construct rather than their countries anymore. And countries that try to force it will have issues. But I don't know. Like, we don't know enough. And that's the problem. If the government knows, like, let's say they know 1,000 times more than they've let on, they're going to have a huge credibility gap to fill. But if they've kind of leaked some of this stuff and people are already familiar with it, it'll be a little bit easier um, to get people through it. Um, I mean, for all we know, it might not be us shooting at them, right? It might be something we're aligned. Like there might be a war between two different factions that we're not even aware of. Like there's, and the other thing too is the government's dumped so much misinformation and disinformation into all this stuff that a bunch of the literature out there is probably false and it was probably deliberately placed there to throw people off. A lot of times it might just be thrown in there to get people off of classified skunkworks projects, right? So I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I mean, which is why this whole digital currency thing is a thing because the Chinese are pushing it, right? I mean, I couldn't imagine living in that that hellhole. Yeah. So there was an interview on what's his name, like Jimmy Church's YouTube channel. He interviewed Whitley Strieber today, and Whitley Strieber said that, and I don't know where he gets this stuff. I mean, it's always fascinating when he talks, but I don't know where he said like the Nordics stopped showing up, and he doesn't know why. He doesn't know if like again, I don't even know if they're a thing, right? It could just be that they're a manifestation of some non-human intelligence that just shows themselves as Nordics to make it easier on us. So I literally don't know. I don't have any. There's so much fake information out there that all we can do is speculate. But they better tell us something soon because this is a Shiza show, man. Like the last meeting that they had was a joke. And by the way, Shiza, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, is a German's word for excrement. Scheiße. So in Germany, this video might get banned, but it won't get banned in the U.S. because the American audience might not know that. But it's definitely a bad word. It's definitely, not what you use in polite company. All right. All right. How are folks doing? Should I call it? Should I call it or keep going? Did he? Yeah, because he's saying some wild stuff like disclosure is this year. But if like the last hearing is like there is a gap that you could drive like a galaxy through in terms of where they need to be in order to have satisfying disclosure. Yeah, that's for sure. But even for those of us who understand bureaucratic speak, it doesn't mean anything. Like it literally means nothing. But Bledsoe was pretty confident that we're getting some sort of disclosure. He said it's already happening, whatever that means. So we shall see. All right, guys. Should I call it or what? It's almost. We're about to hit 2 hours, and I mean, like, people want to stay on. I'm going to stay on. I don't have, if folks want to listen to me ramble and. Oh, right. I think we already have. I mean, if Colonel Corso is right, like, where do you think semiconductors came from? Like, back in the 80s, I had a history teacher, not a history teacher, but I had a teacher in high school who used to be in Army in intelligence, and he said that they had acquired some Soviet aircraft, and they still had vacuum tubes. And we freaked out because we thought that they were preparing for a nuclear war because, vacuum tubes are more likely to survive the electromagnetic pulse effects of a nuclear weapon than solid state electronics. And it turned out that the Russians just didn't have solid state electronics, right? So, like, we've definitely, well, not definitely, but it's very likely, very likely. Um, yeah, I'll stay on unless um, I guess if the number of, like, people watching goes below 3 or goes to 3, I'll drop off, but are you guys? I mean, is it actually interesting what I'm saying? Or, like, I think I sound like a lunatic. I don't get I mean, I don't know if I get sleepy, but we'll see. Yeah, I don't know if this I think a simulation is probably too crude of a way to put it, but I think the Dolores Cannon kind of conception of Earth being a school, like, it's still very real. Like, what you do here matters, but I also think that there's probably a greater reality beyond the veil of death, right? That we kind of have this collective amnesia through the veil, and then it goes away when we die. But again, basing on near-death experiences, like, people who underwent hypnotherapy about some of this stuff. So, without any personal experience, it's hard to piece together. But I'm not I'm not a physicist, right? Like, I have an undergrad electrical engineering degree and a history degree, right? I used to have, like, a clearance, but it's long since expired, and I was never exposed to TSSCI information, even though it was cleared to look at it. But I'm not I'm not an expert. I'm just speculating. And I'm sure if, like, a physicist listened to what I said, he'd probably be like, "Oh my god, who is this dumb f? Who is this?" Like, he has he sounds like Cliff Clavin on Cheers. I think it's Cliff Clavin. Yeah, I mean, I've heard you, like, if each of us is an avatar, you might be simultaneously living other lives. Or people talk about things like that. It's possible. I don't know. I like your choice of words of agreeableness. So there's this 5-factor test that you can take it on personality, and it is the only econometrically sound test that you can take. So I think like Jordan Peterson had, like, some test that you could take on his site. You pay like, I don't know, $20 or something like that, and you take this very comprehensive test, a bunch of questions. And it's not a Jordan Peterson thing. It's like within the realms of psychology, it's the only agreed upon test that is statistically significant in terms of being predictive for your behavior. And I'm trying to remember. There's like like IQ is important too, but it's not part of the test. But IQ is certainly a predictor. But I think there's like agreeableness. There's extroversion, and then of course introversion. There is what else? Conscientiousness, and there's like two more. I can't remember off the top of my head, but um, on on agreeableness, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. In a room of 100 people, I am the least agreeable person. So I have a very high BS detector. And if I think the right course of action is Y for sound reasons, I am almost impossible to convince otherwise. But you need people like me to detect sociopaths is kind of where my skill comes in handy. So, but it's also pretty dangerous because I don't, anyway, I say more, but I'm also have extremely high conscientiousness. So people who do well in business apparently have high IQs, are disagreeable, right? Because they have to make hard decisions, are extroverted. I am not extroverted. I'm definitely toward the introvert scale a little bit more. And they have high conscientiousness, right? Because they it has to do something and they get things done. I'm also very high conscientious. I hope you can see that from the site. Like I'm very, very high attention to detail and things like that. But anyway, there's a bunch of other things that I'm not remembering. There's like 5 different things. But disagreeableness is important to have to some extent with leaders. But right now, what I think you have a lot of leaders who are very agreeable, and as a result, you have them like no one's saying like, "Hey, like that's that theory about a bat and a penguin and stuff like that's kind of strange." But there's like a Wuhan Institute of Technology here that focuses on novel coronavirus research. You don't think the lab leak theory? And they're like, no, racist, right? And they just like bound together and glom together. And people like me, it it's very difficult for people like me to develop this kind of group consciousness, right? Where I just go with the group. I would class myself as more of a lone wolf, if anything. Like I've joined organizations, but I'm not a joiner, right? I just kind of do my own thing. And it took me about 20 years to figure that out. Because I'm the guy who says we have to do course of action X that everybody hates, and I have no problem saying that. And then it takes everybody else 6 months to get to the same place I am because of that agreeableness thing. But anyway, sorry, that was a long, long thing. Whoa. Where did you imagine? Where did you hear that? That's fascinating. Wait, what? I don't know what I don't I'm confused. Wait, what's this? Oh, I'm guessing that's the 5-factor personality test. Actually, let me look at maybe if I look it up. Give me a second. Yeah, it's called the 5-factor model of personality. Oh, yeah. Oh boy. So let's see if there's a way for me to read this. Huh. I'll have to ask him about that. I've been told though he kind of it's likely to be for the first like hour like a Stephen Schwartz interview where he just kind of has like a script that you can't really interrupt them or it'll kind of throw them off. Huh. Must be like an astrology thing. All right. So 5-factor model of personality. So the personality traits are five basic dimensions. Extroversion, we talked about that. Agreeableness, we definitely talked about that. Conscientiousness, we definitely talked about that one. Neuroticism, we didn't talk about that. And yeah, I think in a room of 100 people, I'm probably there's 96 people less neurotic than I am. So I don't know. I guess I'll take that as a win. And then openness to experience. I would say I'm kind of like on the side of openness, but I'm not too far on the side of openness. Which is why, like, by the way, if I wasn't on the open side of openness, there's no way somebody like me would have started a channel like this. It would have been like, I'm not the classic type of person who would start a channel like this. It's almost like, again, we're getting back into this simulation stuff, right? Like, I have contacts in all the areas of society that would be a beneficial network if we got disclosure. And I suddenly started this channel in 2021 because something so cartoonishly absurd happened to me in my last role that if I wrote a Hollywood script, no one would believe. But that made me want to make a change and wanted to work for myself, because that just, I mean, look, I also have a high disagreeableness factor, and people don't like when I push back, but I push back a lot. When I think something's dumb, I will push back. And that has gotten me a lot of trouble. It's also when I believe I'm right and I push back, I'm generally right. I don't always believe I'm right, but when I do, I'm generally right. And I generally push back. I'm pretty aggressive about it. Huh. Yeah, this is the whole what's the word for it? The age of Pisces transitioning into the age of Aquarius, right? Again, here's a little known fact, which is, I'm probably sharing too much, but I've only had 2 serious girlfriends in my entire life. My first girlfriend was a Pisces, and my wife is an Aquarius. How bizarre is that? We have to be living in some like weird simulation. So let's see. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, who knows? Who knows with this stuff? You guys have been supplying all the material. I'm just reacting to the material. But, I'm sure if like CNN took like a random snippet of what I said, I would look like I should be in the Looney Tune bin. Oh, by the way, this is one of the shirts on my on my merchandising. Right? You got the cup. You got the cup here. All right. What else? What else, guys? I had to do like a ridiculous plug. And by the way, I have an idea for a ridiculous shirt too. I haven't gotten around to it, and I don't want to say it because if somebody steals the idea, it'll ruin the gimmick. You can keep going. You can keep throwing stuff out. If I'm not aware of it, like the whole sim stuff, I'm not like that's a little bit harder to verify. But like, I think it matters, and I think it's important. Like, I don't want people to think that it's just like it's all a simulation and nothing matters, because I think it does matter. Yeah. So like I definitely go outside every night and I look up to the sky and look for things. Um, I live near an airport, so I constantly see aircraft flying by. But every once in a while, um, I will see like what looks like again, I have no idea. There could be some atmospheric phenomena that does this. I don't know what it is, but what happens is there'll be like a blink in the air. It's usually light centered, kind of blue haze around it, and it'll look like a teardrop. Like it'll just like it won't streak across the sky like a meteorite, but it'll move like it'll just flash, drop, and then vanish. But like the drop is like boom, boom. It's like very, and I occasionally see that at night. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times. Like I saw something like that last night when I was looking up at the sky. It could just be some sort of like atmosphere, like plasma in the atmosphere. I have no idea. I have no idea what it is, but it definitely blinks and then disappears, and it's very fast. And it's almost like when I'm going inside and I briefly turn around, flash, boom. Um, if I were completely insane, it's almost as if something's like teasing me, right? Like gradually just showing me stuff. But again, like I want to see something, so I wouldn't, I wouldn't report anything because again, there could be some physicist who comes, oh yeah, it's just atmospheric plasma and it's a plasmoid or this and that. Like it's nothing. Um, so anyway, I just keep watching. Like, and then mostly it's with animals. It's just weird stuff with animals, like the owls flying around like literally flying at 6 to 7 feet above the ground, past my window, and then past that window. And like one, I just looked out, it flew by, and then I closed that window. I kind of like, wow, that was weird. And then I went, there was some, maybe 30 seconds passed. I looked out the other window and then it flew right by again. It was very weird. But again, it's just, there's no, one could easily chalk these things up as coincidences. No, I mean, I certainly look. I've been trying to get in touch with Morehouse because he knows how to do government contracting, like how to set things up. I was thinking about setting up like an LLC or something just to be ready in case. I mean, again, this is extreme, but if they start to parcel out these technologies, I'd probably start a company to try to extract some of this stuff because there'll be enough stuff to work on for people for the next 20 years if this is real. So, um, yeah, I think people will still have jobs, but I think there'll be a lot more jobs and they'll be a lot more exciting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what it is. I like Janice Park. It's just like all this nonsense that's spewing out of your mouth is fascinating. And I'm like, oh, I mean, I look, full disclosure, I do also write speculative fiction. So I can weave a story out of anything. I can come up with meaning out of anything. So take that with a grain of salt, right? Like it's clouding my judgment on this stuff. Like I would not swear before anybody that this stuff is like I don't know what is going on yet, but there's a lot of weird, coincidences in my life that are just like with nuclear stuff. I'll give you an example. So you've all heard of 3 Mile Island, okay? That was in 1979. I was 4 years old at the time. My grandparents, and it happened in like 3 Mile Island is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My grandparents lived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I called my parents today. I'm like, did we? Because it happened, the meltdown happened, or the beginning of the meltdown, whatever it was, on May or March 28th, 1979. So I was around 4 years old. I'm dating myself here, but I asked my parents, like, did we go there for Easter? Because Easter that year was April 16th. And apparently my mother said, "No, no, no, your grandparents like said don't come." We didn't go there that year. So, but like I've been there multiple times. I had been there multiple times before and multiple times after, growing up, stuff like that. And then up, I'm still here. Still here, guys. Can you hear me? Okay. Just give me a second. I'm just trying to figure this thing out. This happens every time. There we go. All right. Can you hear me now? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, probably. Huh. Not sure what that decision is, though. Okay, cool. Yeah, what happens is this. I mean, I explained this before. This camera is supposed to. It's plugged into my computer, but it just drains the battery. So I have to use my webcam here. Yeah, and it was a great horned owl too. Like the thing was massive. And I just know that from the sound of the call that night. But I don't know what any of this. I don't know what any of this stuff means. Right? I don't know why I'm seeing this stuff. It's because I'm seeking it, or if it's because again, I interviewed the leading worldwide expert on the very very narrow area of UFOs and owls. So of course I'm going to see owls everywhere I look. So I'm trying to keep, you know, stay level headed. Seriously, like I'll keep going until it says three. So I mean, how do I know that I wasn't? So talking about the story again about this nuclear thing. So I'm just like, well, what if there's some? Because again, my master's thesis was to prevent the Iranians from getting a nuclear weapon, and to my knowledge, they still don't have one. So it was helpful. It was helpful to the U.S. government. But the other thing is, I was looking up. My uncle was. I think that we once went to Little Rock Air Force Base because my uncle was stationed there back in the early '80s, and I barely remember it. I just remember being held up at the gate and stuff like that, and we were going through it at night. But I just looked it up. I'm like, I wonder what they had there because my uncle was like a navigator or something like that. I'm like, I wonder if they had nukes there. And during a period of time, they had Titan II nuclear missiles. I'm like, that's kind of weird. And then I read even more carefully. Apparently, in 1980, there was some mechanic who dropped a ratchet into, he was like working on one of these missile silos, and it launched one of the warheads 100 feet or something like that. And there's no, to my knowledge, any like nuclear accident associated because there were safety measures on the warhead. But that happened in 1980. So I found out that my uncle was there. We probably visited sometime in the summer of 1981 or something like that. So like as a child, I was at this place where this crazy nuclear accident may have you know, where it had just recently happened. It's just a weird. I have weird coincidences like that throughout my life that just don't make it seem like it's not real. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, that's possible. I definitely heard two hooting. That was certain. Toward like later that night, there was one kind of back that direction in my backyard. At least that was where the hoot was coming from. And then there was one beyond that that was a little bit farther away. But I don't know if they. I mean, it could have very well been the same owl, the one like what I saw. Like, there's no way for me to determine that. But later on, I heard two hooting, and it was the great horned owl hooting. So yeah, I feel like there's something going on. Like just in general, and it's not just me. I think there's something going on for everybody. I mean, even like if you look at the last 3 years, it's like Clown Town. Like, just I mean, who like you have like a television host becomes the president of the United States, right? Then you have like government agencies censoring speech. You have like a hoax, like a P tape hoax that people believe. Like, it's just like it's Clown Town. You have rumors that we blew up a Russian pipeline, which is basically an act of war. Uh, but everything's quiet about it. Like, there's just so much. We had bank failures. We had like there's just AI is starting to become much more prevalent. It's Clown Town. Like, it's just there's so much going on that I don't know. What else do folks want to know? We're down to five. We're down to five. So two more. If two more leave, I'll call it a night. How long have we been on? We're on almost going for like 2.5 hours. Good Lord. What else do people want to talk about? Oh, um, I'm working on so many projects that I'm always procrastinating. So I've been procrastinating on this book. I have like one chapter left to do, so that could be part of it. There's also I'm contemplating doing one of these regression things with Yvonne Smith to try to explain some of this coincidence stuff. But I've been putting that off too. I just have to fill out the paperwork, but I doubt like those things are not super consequential. Bruno, Bruno, did you just join, or you've been here the whole time? Oh, last minute gambit. Like, what's the last minute gambit? Because I know that Thucydides' trap is Athens versus Sparta. You have a new emergent upstart against an established power, and I think that's basically the Thucydides trap is what is used to describe the ongoing dynamic between the United States and China. Just for folks who are wondering what a Thucydides trap is. Well, we didn't technically lose reserve currency, but um, what really screwed that up was all the sanctions in Russia, because we did stuff that the Russians expected, but then we yanked the rug out of them on stuff that probably shouldn't have done, which just sends a signal to the rest of the world that the U.S. if you're in the dollar, the U.S. can do some really shady stuff, and suddenly you aren't in dollars anymore. So that, in my opinion, that wasn't a great uh, strategic move. Tactically, it might have been smart, but strategically, it was asinine. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't think there'll be a replacement, for the dollar, because like who wants to? I mean, is anybody scrambling to get into the yuan? I mean, you think we're a clown show? China will just, they have a habit of just changing the rules on people once they have leverage. Yeah, it was stupid. It was dumb. Now, like funding Ukraine and sending them weapons and stuff like that was smart. Like that's a cheap way to weaken Russia. But these sanctions, and some of them were fine, but the ones that undermined, that were a surprise, where we circumvented rules and did some weird stuff. I had a few examples, but I can't remember what they were off the top of my head. Yeah, I think that's why we need disclosure. Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that we probably have another 50 to 100 years of Pax Americana, because the Roman Empire had worse issues for far longer than what we're having now. I think these things take a while to unravel. Yeah. Yeah, which is like, once the Saudis started negotiating with the Chinese and stuff like that, that's not good. Yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing. Like, people still want to live in the United States, right? Like, people don't want to live in China. And that's important. Like, there's still this cultural, intellectual, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it leadership, but there's a cultural, intellectual attractiveness to it. The problem is, like free speech and things like that are things to aspire to. The problem is we're not, we're kind of slowly moving it away from it, because technology is just kind of doing that. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Huh. Interesting. Yeah. 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 Well, and that's the problem. Like, the U.S. is kind of heading in that direction, and on both sides, right? It's not like there's a little bit of it with Trump, and there's even more of it with the current tenant of the White House. Yeah, it's the mass surveillance thing, because people think that it's so easy to do. We won't really do anything with it. We're not really, we don't really look at that stuff. And then next thing you know, you become an enemy of the state, and suddenly they pull all this stuff. Like Palantir does that stuff, right? They look at receipts, they look at all sorts of stuff, and they can track people down, find them. Um, so yeah, like they say they won't do things, but even with like Twitter, right? Like, you wouldn't expect them to try to circumvent the rules, but once they have people, embed people in the companies and stuff like that, I can understand using it against foreign entities and like to prevent misinformation, stuff like that. But once you start targeting your own citizens, like, you've lost the narrative, right? It's messed up. Let's see. Oh man, yeah. Um, that's actually a great question. I'm half convinced that this has been going on long before the Patriot Act. I think the reason why kind of these elites, like kind of the baby boomer elites, are holding on with their white knuckles for so long, they're white knuckling it for so long, is before the advent of the internet, everything seemed like it was more free and stuff like that. But there was a very limited number of distribution channels to get information out. And what happened with the internet is you had a true democratization of information. And as a result, like some of the bad stuff is getting out, and people who are in control don't like that. So I think they've always been able to control the narrative. I think they just have less of a hold on it now, and they're, you know, like, look, nobody's perfect, but the face that government has always shown prior to the advent of the internet is that we have things under control, everything's going fine. But if you're ever in a crisis and things like that, like these people are, scared out of their minds too. Like think about the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was a shiza show, right? But it's just what they tell you on camera is not. If they really told you the truth, people might panic, right? I mean, there's a topic I can very recently we can talk about, but well, no, I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to cause, you know, I, I don't want to make it worse. But what they say in public is they have to kind of have to say that. Yeah, I mean, that's why YouTube is beautiful, right? Because you have Hollywood producing like one type of movie that it's just getting tiresome. Like we need alternatives, and I think this is part of it. Um, Probably before. I mean, JFK was, there was massive vote tampering in Chicago that got him elected. So probably even before JFK. Oh, for sure. I mean, it may be tied to the National Security Act of 1947, right? Which created the CIA and all these other entities, NSA, all that stuff. So it could have started back as far as that. Yep. I mean, they're already using that. Like they use drones to like look at farmland and all that stuff with hedge funds. I mean, actually, they were doing that back in the '80s. I know when I was at Morgan Stanley, there was this guy Byron Ween who was like a master stock picker, but he was curious about inventory, so he like rented a helicopter and flew around like the lot of one of the companies he was covering and literally just counted everything to see if it was true or not. And you can do that with drones today, but like if the problem is filtering all this information, right? Um, oh well, they they do. There's actually firms that you can hire that do that for you. Uh, I know because I've been at a company that did that before, right? It's not always. Sometimes you want to break into a market, so you'll hire like there's companies that have like a bunch of former Mossad agents or former MI6 people, and what they'll do is they'll scope out. Like, let's say you wanted to go into the Chinese market, they'll scope out who the players are and like what you have to do, and a lot of those people are former intelligence people, and they make a lot of money for advising people and things like that. Yeah, yeah, that's I'm trying to be careful with all this stuff, but I also have at least my interviews are all on Spotify, and then all my videos are supposed to be auto uploading to Rumble, but they don't always make it there for some. I don't know why, but all right. Thank you, Jeannie Park. I'm glad you were listening. You enjoyed my mad ramblings. I'm hoping they're not so mad, but until there's some sort of disclosure event, I'm just like, screaming into the void. Yeah, I mean, yeah, or you just manufacture something at Wuhan. I doubt that's the case, but I think that was just. I think they were just trying to produce vaccines for the like most highly probable contagions that would break out, and they did it in China because it's illegal to do in the U.S. So they were trying to protect people, and then it was just so incompetently handled that that's what happened. Interesting. Yep. By Allied and Securitas. Interesting. Yeah, I think that's what may be coming. But again, like it's also likely that there will be disclosure, but it'll be like a whimper, you know, like something that's just not impressive. Wow. Interesting. Well, I can imagine with Amazon, they would have heavy security requirements for all their servers, right? That's probably one of the bigger areas of a security need for obvious reasons. Yeah, like I said earlier, Bruno, you weren't here. That Chris Bledsoe said it was definitely happening when I interviewed him yesterday, I think. So it's pretty fresh information, and he said it on camera, so it's not like I have it on video, or I will have it on I have it on video, and it'll be published probably not next week, but probably the week after. Interesting. Well, I mean, they also it's also a pretty rough culture. I actually like hiring former Amazon people because they work their butts off. I don't like hiring Google or um, Twitter people, not Twitter, Facebook Meta people because they've had it pretty cushy. Um, Amazon the culture is brutal. It's absolutely brutal. Yeah, well, you'll have like 3 hours to catch up on by the time this thing's over. Good lord. Interesting. No, I haven't. Can I read that on Reddit, or do I actually have to create a 4chan account? I mean, I can make a compelling argument why there won't be disclosure, right? Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to have like a truth and reconciliation committee for abductees, and maybe the government had an agreement, so it was fine. Ah, interesting. Yeah, I think if there is a presence, I think they've been here for not even thousands of years, maybe millions of years. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, who knows? I mean, there's no idea. All right, what other guests do people want to see? I keep forgetting to ask that question. Oops. Yeah, I can see that. No, I mean, I'm just glad you're here. I haven't seen Kev though. He's missed like the last two. I don't know what's going on with him. Oh yeah, we're at 3, so let me just get through all this. Yeah, I can see that. All right. Thank you, Bruno. See you soon. Man, I tell you, this coincidence thing is insane. I sent him an email today asking him if he would come back on to talk about his book. Literally, I sent him an email today, this morning. So I haven't heard back, but maybe we'll see. Yeah, I think that Skinny Bob video is a hoax. I think there's actually like these Hollywood folks did like a debunking. They were like film experts, and they were looking at the frames and all that stuff, and they were able to prove that the Skinny Bob video was a hoax. But I don't know. It seemed credible to me that, like, at least the debunking video seemed pretty credible to me. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole like that's a whole other area. I should, um, well, that's the thing. Like Google has never, I don't think they ever had like a big layoff, which is why the culture is so like again. I've worked with people who former Google, and they're very entitled. Like they're very pampered, and I think that was a wake up call. I've been at companies where it's just like, you know, you're not gonna make your numbers. You start pulling triggers and laying people off. Like I've been at only companies that are just brutal, so I'm used to it. Um, but yeah, people ain't gonna protest because they get scared. They want to keep their jobs. Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, just send me the on Twitter, or I think I may have even given you my email. Email's probably better, but just send me a list, and then I can try to work my way because I have to. I'm doing some traveling in June, so I have to like I need to get like May, June, and part of July done, so I don't get myself into trouble and miss an episode because I have not missed a week since I started this thing in January 2022, and I don't intend to. But um, the faster I can front load those, the better. Huh. You're on fire, man. Let me show you something really quick. Uh let's see. Two episodes. Two episodes. Not next week, but the week after. So yeah, I have two Reardon episodes in the I'm still editing them, but he's definitely gonna be on. Skinny Bob. Yeah, yeah, it's a very sweet story. I know what you meant. I know what you meant, Bruno. I he's the only I've interviewed Daz, and I've interviewed Edward Reardon, but I think, yeah, I know who Dick is. I've seen some of his videos, and he's really good. Yeah, Google him, please. Yes, very, very title. Probably not anymore. Not anymore. But I think people are just happy to have their jobs at this point. They haven't meet capitalism yet. I'm not sure I know what that means, but let me see if there's um well, since this channel is a business, it is never a vacation. I actually had to fill out I'm going to a national park. I had to pay a national park $350 to get a permit for commercial filming. It's ridiculous. Um, but we'll see what I can get there. I mean, I'm just expecting to get like bear stuff. But yeah, so there's that, and then there's what's the other thing? The LibertyCon thing. So yeah, thank you, brother. I use all the help I can get, believe me. By the way, he's a good dude. I really got along with him. I really got along with him. So he's kind of a no BS kind of guy. And yeah, he's a good dude. I like him a lot. It's the ice water trash can. Hmm. Okay. I don't know. I'm not too bright, so I don't I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Um yeah. Yeah, I did talk about national security. Yeah, in fact, I have a friend who, like, he won't talk to me on the phone right now. I mean, but he's still a friend. But um I think I was pretty close on my predictions, just based on open source data. That I was probably a little bit too close, at least on the Russia Ukraine war. That I probably, um, made it look like I knew something I didn't. But I'm just good at predicting things. It's not. I don't have access to anything other than open source material. But I think it was so spot on that maybe people were nervous, right? Because I say things like I would be surprised if we didn't have some special ops units in there, and like Delta and things like that, and we probably do. And that stuff is like super secret stuff, which I don't know. I have no nothing. That's just based on if I were in charge, what I would do. But and that's kind of what I base it on. Like, you're gonna want to have these guys close to the action so that they can shape things, but not too close that they get captured. And anyway, it is what it is. Oh yeah, well yeah. What happened to Pat Price? He had a heart attack. Um, Whether or not the heart attack was natural, induced by the KGB or some other government agency, I don't know. But it was awfully, like, he got pretty close to a NSA facility that he wasn't supposed to know about, that the CIA didn't even know about. And he was able to read folders through remote viewing. Anyway, and he also may have been disappeared, right? He might not, may not have died in the way that it was reported he died. So I've heard all sorts of weird stuff like that. Oh, I don't know. I think capitalism's not perfect, but it's better than everything else. Um, Especially if you see the way the government, under both administrations runs. It's not. It doesn't give me any confidence that there's a better solution. No, probably not. So you mean Reardon? Royadin? I don't know. I don't know what that means. Yeah, but again, I'm not, like, I don't have access to any of that information. It's just I just ask good questions. Huh. Well, yeah, I mean, that would make sense though, right? Because if you have those servers, if a nation state wanted to really disrupt things, that anyway, I gotta be careful what I say because again, this stuff we were talking about earlier. I don't know anything, but I know how to think that way, and that's what gets me into trouble. Yeah, but I mean, I'm harmless. I don't know. I don't know if there would be any reason why I would be blacklisted. Um, because I had no trouble getting an interview with Bledsoe, and he's tightly linked to some of this stuff. So I'm asking the right questions, but I don't know. I don't know if they would have any reason to throttle me or anything like that. I mean, I am growing. It's just super slow. Yeah, I said that like I think I said that last year sometime. Right? But it was like done in such a speculative way. Yeah, I think the leaked document said we had 100, but I also think those leaked docs were on purpose. Um, I know that from people outside of the US that for certain countries the intel was accurate, but when you do stuff like that, you would leak a bunch of stuff that's true, and then you'd also weave in to make it more credible stuff that's untrue. So, because the thing that doesn't make sense is that this like 20-year-old kid had access to stuff that you don't get access to until you're mid 20s at the earliest. So it made no sense. It felt to me that he was kind of a patsy, and it was a disinformation op in order to present the Russians with a false, uh, like a deception plan for the Ukrainians, like their disposition of forces. And then you can include a bunch of stuff that they can independently verify is true. And as a result, they're more likely to believe the false stuff. I mean, the Ukrainians did an amazing job with their Eastern offensive. Like that was a huge deception operation. They telegraphed that they were going to attack Kherson, whatever it was called, and then they ended up attacking Eastern Ukraine. Um, let's see. Hmm. Huh. Well, again, they have these like servers, right? Where there's a ton of information on it. So, you know, I mean, Amazon and Facebook should also be super. Uh, although I'm not sure which company won the contract with the government for stuff. It was either Microsoft or Google, so it could be related to like a big government contract. Well, yeah, that too, but uh, that's for sure. Oh yeah, no, I had an episode on that. If you look at one of my Lynn Buchanan episodes, there were four of them. There's one in Zimbabwe. There's one in Mount Zeal, Australia. There's one in Mount Hayes in Alaska, and then there's one in Mount Perdido in Spain. I can't remember the name of the one in Zimbabwe, but Ingo Swann looked at them, and they generally used as targets. Lynn Buchanan had been inside them as part of remote viewing, but yeah, it's one of my four episodes. Sweden is nice. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think he spells it Riordan. Yeah, especially like the search engine and all that stuff. Like they're also doing a lot of AI, so maybe there's like government level AI research. I bet you those UFO fragments are the same ones from uh, Chris Bledsoe, because Chris Bledsoe talked about the molten metal that drips off of the orbs. Um, and then Diane Pasulka has a pretty good relationship with Chris Bledsoe. So it's possible that they came to Gary Nolan via Chris Bledsoe, because Chris Bledsoe gave them to what's his name, Lou Elizondo, and then had the government analyze them, and then subsequently classified them. So I don't know. I can ask, because I haven't interviewed him yet. So yeah, this Tim Taylor guy is an enigmatic figure. Yeah, I reached out to him months ago. No response. Nothing. I also reached out to Eric Davis. Same thing. Nothing. Yeah, definitely possible. I interviewed there once just for like a finance position, and then right before they IPO'd, they reached out to me for a finance position in an area of finance I didn't want to do, and I just turned it down before I went public. But the stuff that they can do is scary. It's just like they take unstructured information and can find people. Like they found criminals and things like that by tracking receipts, video cameras. Like it's an interesting company. I'm not sure about the business model, how sustainable that is, but in terms of what they can do, it's fascinating stuff. Yeah, he's great. I really like him. Interesting. I still have yet to reach out to her. She would be a good interview too. Interesting. Okay, so probably different than Garrett than the Bledsoe stuff. I'm not familiar with Billy Meyer. Who's that? No, because it's kind of it's kind of creepy. Like I would be a little bit creeped out if some rando called me if I wasn't expecting it. Like I generally don't answer my phone because I get a lot of garbage um, phone calls. If they leave a message, I will call them back. Oh yeah, I mean they also use it. There was a that Navy guy that he was like a mass shooter or something like that. They were able to get all the camera data and receipts and things like that, and they were able to track him. I think they found him in Big Bear, but Palantir was working on that behind the scenes. Um, I think I can't remember what year. It was probably back in 2012 or something. Yeah, I heard the Pinkerton Detective Agency still exists. I had no idea, but I think somebody like recently hired them for something. Yeah, he doesn't he sees a lot of stuff he doesn't like either. So he's a good dude. All right, where are we at? I think I should probably call it just because um I don't know, maybe somebody will watch a 3 hour video post. Oh, hold on. There's like three more comments. Yeah, I'm sure they do. Sure they do. I'll try, but I also have to get their phone numbers too. That's the other problem. Yeah, thank you, Moon Man. Send me those names. That would be awesome, and we'll see if I can kind of try to make it happen. No worries. I'm just glad you're here. I appreciate you joining the call. Yeah, that's right. You said like an hour ago you had to get off. Oh man. All right. Take care. Take care, Bruno. All right, I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna call it. So let me see. How do I do this? I'm gonna put on some music first because I like ending it with the music and stuff. So let's see. Banner. What am I doing here? All right, so I'm gonna change it to that, and then I'm gonna say bye, everyone. It was a pleasure, and every time I get on this, I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna have enough to talk about, and I always do. So, but I wouldn't have it without everybody in this call. And thanks for supporting the channel, and I appreciate everything. I appreciate you, and hopefully this year will be an interesting year, right? May the old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. So, good night, everyone.